You're tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
This is one of these stories that is shameful and frustrating, but at the same time, you can't help but find it just completely and utterly hilarious. And you'll understand what I mean in just a couple of moments here. Comes from the Washington Post, an exclusive scoop that came out, I believe, on Saturday. Biden administration considers flying migrants to states near the Canadian border for processing. Now, the rationale behind this is that the Biden administration, or specifically the United States actually, has been dealing with a surge in migrants coming across the Rio Grande into the southern United States, and the rationale is that they think it's now open season. Trump is gone, the wall's not there in full, so everyone can just waltz right in such large numbers that the U.S. is having trouble processing them and keeping them on track to their goals and targets and all of these things. And the result of this, of course, is, kids in cages, although no one cares when it's not the Trump administration that is presiding over the children in cages. And now everyone is just doing apologetics for the Biden immigration policies. But again, we go back to the subject matter at hand. This is such an overwhelming number that they need to get people processed elsewhere. So what do they want to do? Ship them to Customs and Border Protection outposts in border states like Montana and North Dakota and Michigan. Now, when I read this story, my thought is, well, I wonder if that's just because they know that if they just drop them off at the Canadian border, everyone will be able to walk right into Canada, and then they're no longer the U.S.'s problem. And I'm not saying that's deliberately the plan, but that's certainly my read of it. And you know what? If you're Joe Biden, that's actually pretty good policy. Well, up in Canada, they have that Justin Trudeau guy. He doesn't really care about his border. We can just threaten to deport them, drop them off at the 49th parallel, and boom, they self-deport. They're Canada's problem. We don't have to do anything with it. USA, USA. Not saying that's the plan, but pretty good. The reason they want to go up there is because with the Canada-US border having been closed for pretty much a year, all of the Customs and Border Protection officials up on the American-Canadian border have considerably little to do. And that border closure was extended yet again, now going through to April, at which point it will likely be renewed again and again and again. 54 weeks into 2 weeks to flatten the curve, Canada-US border closed, flights still restricted very heavily, 2-week quarantine, hotel quarantine, all of these measures with no end in sight. And the only way you seem to be able to get into Canada or the US is if you are an illegal migrant. And that's the real injustice in this. The border has been closed to people like me and my wife if we want to just take a day trip over to Port Huron. The border has been closed to a lot of other families who have to see family members on other sides of the border. The border's been closed to anyone except those who waltz in on Roxham Road, those who travel across the Rio Grande, and those ones, well, the border's open for them. And this is something that countries need to grapple with. And whether you like Trump or didn't like Trump, Trump understood the problem that immigration was posing. Stephen Harper understood the importance of orderly and safe migration, legal migration. Justin Trudeau doesn't. Justin Trudeau has never recanted laying out the red carpet for illegal immigrants by saying, Canada is your home, welcome to Canada, that infamous tweet. Never has he walked that back. And even now in the course of the pandemic, when the government, it seemed like, was going to start just turning people around, it's amazing how that hasn't actually happened the way it was promised. And I would also point out an interesting stat here. In January of this year, January of 2021, Canada admitted 26,600 new permanent residents. So 26,600 people to Canada that were new immigrants to Canada effectively. Now that is a 10% increase over the number that were admitted in January of 2020, which, as you may remember, was the before times, before lockdown. The government has dramatically increased its immigration targets with a plan to bring in about 400,000 immigrants a year. I want you to think about that for a moment. Because Canadians, as mentioned, still can't just travel across the border because Canada and the US have a deal that prohibits people just going back and forth. Canadian families are, again, separated in some cases by the Canadian border. But the government's role is about increasing immigration to make up for lost time. which just seems particularly unfair when the borders are open for one group and not for another. Now, I would say let's open up for travel. Let's allow people to travel. Let's allow people to live their lives without subjecting them to Orwellian travel measures and other restrictions, but that's not what the government is doing.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.